Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good evening, Nant. Shalom, good people. Welcome to another episode of Liberty and Friends. That's right, Liberty and Friends. We are your premium Sunday night viewing as we wrap up on the show the news week that was. We look at all those top headlines that got you talking, got you angry, got you sad maybe, or maybe even had you a bit on the happy side. Welcome to it. It is Liberty and Friends. I'm seeing myself lag a little bit. I'll let you, as the viewers, just give me feedback to see if everything is okay on your side by way of the show. But welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends. Remember, your only price of admission here on Liberty and Friends is to hit that like button. Do it right now. Smash that like button. And hey, if you can, share the stream. And let's get people onto the show tonight. We don't have a packed house by way of panelists tonight, but we do have a very interesting and rather veritable mix of panelists tonight. So thank you, VB. Thank you. I see your comment that everything is well, no lag on your side. Okay, in that case, let's get cooking with grease and get actually into the conversation tonight. We're going to have a look at a few topics tonight. They're not going to be as hardcore, perhaps, as they usually are, because it has been a relatively speaking chilled news week, if I can call it that. But so there are a few issues, though, that we will unpack tonight. By the way, let me just quickly get this out. You, dear viewer, as usual on Liberty and Friends, are very much a part of the show by way of me flighting your comments on the bottom of the screen. But hey, tonight I'm also going to open the lines. So have a look at the comment section, whether you're watching the simulcast on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube. Have a look in the comment section when I post the link that gets you into the studio tonight. And you can pose your questions directly to the panel or even have your say around what got you interested this week in terms of the Newsweek, pardon me. So welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends. Let's get straight into that conversation. Tonight on Liberty and Friends, we have the MD, that's the Managing Director of Dear SA, that wonderful platform that gives you the ability to have your say. That's Rob Hutchinson. Of course, there he is on screen. Rob, good evening and welcome to LNF.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, my brother. Very, very good to have you again. Rob, of course, was on the show on Wednesday for the Big Daddy Liberty show, or pardon me, correction, on Thursday on Vlog 122, when we unpacked the issue of your responses, what you, dear South African, have been saying to the question of whether there should be a vax mandate, yes or no, or a vax passport, yes or no. You've had your say, and an overwhelming majority of you have said hell to the no to both those proposals. So we'll touch on that topic again tonight as we unpack this topic in a much broader way. Remember, Liberty and Friends is the one long format show that I have, a 90-minute show usually on your Sunday evening viewing. Speaking about other guests who I have on the show with me tonight, a familiar face, someone who you've seen before on the show. This chap is doing some awesome work. He is one of the fellas at the Action Society SA initiative. And he's going to tell us tonight about a new initiative that he's dropping. But before any of that, there he is on screen, Ian Cameron. Ian, good evening. Welcome to LMF.
Hey, CK, thanks. It's good to be with you. I'm looking forward to discussion. And Rob, I have to get it in there. I heard you're getting a vaccine on camera tonight.
Absolutely.
Yo, I can just imagine that. Hashtag jab on the show. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to it. And of course, last but not least, a fellow who is the host of the Joe Emilio show. His namesake, which is of course his name, pardon me, that's Joe Emilio. There he is on screen. Joe, good evening. Welcome to LNF.
Sorry, just muting myself. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me again. I'm very excited to be on the show. Hello, Rob and Ian. It's good to see you guys again.
Very good to have you on the show, Joe. Welcome to it. fellas, we're going to get into it because, even in the little notes that I sent you guys, and I say little because I didn't send much to you fellas insofar as what we're going to chew on tonight, which I suppose is a good thing because we are going to open the lines to the viewers. So guys will come on and throw issues at us, which we can discuss and opine on throughout the course of tonight. But, I must begin here. Rob, I want us to pick up this conversation because I even risked being, I didn't risk it. I've already been flagged on YouTube this morning when I posted a short clip on this particular issue. I've been accused of misinformation by basically suggesting that the South African government is looking to go down the pathway of a vaccine mandate. I don't know how that is considered misinformation by YouTube and any of the other Silicon Cartel individuals, but here we are, Rob, at this point where there does seem to be a concerted effort by the establishment, who I've defined before as being government, politicians in government, the ANC, the corporate media who amplifies their rhetoric, of course, those corrupted segments of the medical fraternity, and of course, Big Pharma, the establishment, as I loosely call them. There does seem to be a concerted effort by the establishment to control the narrative.
Without a doubt, and it's never been more obvious than during this survey that we have put out. So it's a basic survey because we preempted what is to come. The president's already said that they're considering a vaccine mandate and passport. He's put together a task team and so on. And there's the vaccine mandate bill will be released for public comment, and I'd say either this week or after we've had another family meeting or before Christmas. There's no doubt about that, because they have a deadline to meet of February, and they have a target to reach of a certain percentage of the country must be vaccinated. And they can only do that through coercion. And the mandate is definitely a form of coercion. We've had considerable feedback already. Over 180,000 people have commented on it. And it's not a petition, it's an open comment. So you can either say, yes, I do, no, I don't, and then provide your reasons as to why. And the reason I say it's been, there's definitely sort of media manipulation and other nefarious means to get the narrative out there, is because we did experience I don't want to call it a hack, but a rather concerning motive where somebody using the single IP address from a single source injected 20,000 or over 20,000 comments in a matter of 2 hours. And all of those were the same. They originated from the same point. They were all sequential, one after the other, and they all said yes to vaccine mandates. So that is an extremely concerning situation. We have put in, we've launched a proper investigation, a forensic investigation. We think we have an idea who it is, but I'm not prepared to say just yet without any solid evidence. But when the evidence has been revealed through the investigation, then we will make it public to the extreme. We will go large on this and reveal these. I want to say one individual, but these individuals.
And again, Rob, I must dwell on this point for a moment. And I do respect the fact that you rightly say, look, until we have the hard evidence, we'll then start hitting out with actual names. But with that being said, I must talk about this particular trend and almost desperation to maintain a narrative. And there is a gaggle of individuals who are doing this, using multiple avenues, of course, in order to maintain, pardon me, the status quo of the narrative, what is considered the acceptable narrative on this, which is, of course, when it comes to vaccine mandates, the suggestion that, South Africans definitely want the vaccine mandate, or they definitely want the vaccine passport, and this is how they often frame it, because once we have the mandate, once we have the passport, then we're guaranteed to go back to, quote, normal. That is the essential bargain, the trade-off the suggestion being made that the gateway to you enjoying freedoms and liberties and rights is contingent on you accepting this being either mandatory or via a passport. The passport, of course, being another way, just a slick way of suggesting a medical segregation. The idea of a segregated society based on one's jab status. But let me go into this a little further, and I want to bring in the other two gentlemen here, Joe, in particular. I want to come to you. I've seen this on my own pages. There are a particular gaggle of individuals, and I too will name them at some stage, who are quite literally, it seems as though they camp on my page waiting for any post in order to push a pro-vaccine mandate or passport message in particular, even though the data as I presented, the fact, if you will, as I presented, suggests that South Africans don't want either a mandate or a passport.
No, it's ridiculous, to be honest. I mean, I think it's these individuals that do this, that kind of like stalk people like the DRSA and yourself and anyone else. I mean, you're not the only one. I've had some of them on my timeline. The block function is very useful, but I know that they do make, they keep on making anonymous accounts. So at some point, you have to put a definite stop to it. But it's amazing the pushback, isn't it? When you start presenting facts. I mean, let's take Omicron, for example, at the moment, right? I think there's been one death. I stand to be corrected, but last time I checked, there was one death. Yes, cases are rising, but today in an article that was released, I think yesterday, talking about the president might have to come out sometime this week to address the nation. There was a doctor in there, I think Michelle Boone, something like that, who said that there are an increase in hospitalizations, but people, number one, are not staying as long as they used to. The illness appears very mild, and it's definitely not as bad as the previous waves. So all this is happening, and you present these facts to people, and they're like, no, it's getting really bad. We need another lockdown, ban alcohol, ban this. And it's like, but guys, it's not actually that bad. And that's one thing that people are forgetting to look at is, yes, cases are rising, but what about the deaths? There's been barely any deaths in this wave, and that's super, super important. And the moment you start pointing out these facts, people want to shut you down. They call you anti-vax. They call you all these ridiculous things. That, like, I don't care. You want to get the vax, get the vax. You don't want to get it, don't want to get it. I'm pro-choice. Like, just live and let live. It's as simple as that. That's how I see it. So yeah, I think it's ridiculous that people are pushing this narrative of, we need to start. We saw, what's his name? I forgot his name. Is a journalist who said, like, yeah, the unvaccinated don't deserve to be in sports stadiums, and they shouldn't be in malls, and they shouldn't be X, Y, and Z. And it's like, guys,
Peter Louis Myburgh.
Yes, that one. I hate using this term, but it feels like we're in some kind of apartheid-like system, only for a medical apartheid, if you will. Like, you're segregating the unvaxxed and the vaccinated. It's no longer about race. It's about unvaxxed and vaccinated. And you just can't do that. And I fail to see how that attempt is going to work in South Africa. All that's going to happen is you're going to have a very, very successfully run underground illegal vaccine certificates syndicate that's going to happen, and the majority of people are not going to listen. I mean, 70% of South Africans don't want to get the vaccine, so I fail to see how you're going to force people who don't want to get it, especially those that live in the townships.
Well, this is the issue, Ian, insofar as what we're basically seeing here is, effectively, if they continue down this particular rabbit hole, is setting up ordinary South Africans, the faith, flag, family, and freedom type South African who I often talk about, to suddenly be face the prospect, of facing state violence. Because remember, all government decisions are backed by the prospect of state violence at the end of the day. Whether we want to admit this or not, because some people seem to believe, or seem to think rather, that the state is their family, or that a one Cyril Ramaphosa is the father of the nation who addresses us in his often condescending term. But the point I want to get at here is a reminder to every person watching the show right now that every government decision at the end of the day is backed by state guns, state violence. There is a prospect, therefore, that if something is mandated, like this particular vaccine, and you, for whatever your reasons may be, decide you don't want to accede to that mandate, you face the risk of imprisonment, or, of course, if you resist, some form of violence against you. Rob, you're unmute. Can you unmute yourself, Ian? Sorry, I think you may have forgotten to hit the unmute button.
Oh, sorry, I was busy eating a chocolate, and I don't want to interrupt Rob and Joe. So,
no stress.
So I obviously agree with you, but I want to take one step back. I think there's a series of events that we need to take into consideration. This is not about a vaccine. This is not about a virus. It's simple. It's about control. And we can see, specifically from an ANC point of view, in the last few years especially, the more they lost control, in terms of they lost the little bit of good faith they had with many people. Well, many might be an overstatement, but the point is that their support is decreasing drastically. People are becoming far more suspicious about what they want to do, what they are aiming to do. And it is very clear, if you consider something like land expropriation without compensation, you consider the Firearm Control Amendment Bill, all of these things are attempts to centralize power. And when that ultimate, let's call it ultimate threat of violence from the state becomes possible, is when you've centralized as much as you possibly can in terms of governance. So we even saw with Cyril Ramaphosa. I mean, very recently with his cabinet reshuffle, he basically pushed every single bit of what we know as the security sector or security sector of government. He pulled in under the presidency. So there's a definite attempt for complete centralization. There's a definite attempt for complete control, and that's what really bothers me. I'm not knowledgeable enough on many of the technicalities. It's not my field to even, I don't know enough about medicine, for example. But what I can say, just from a political point of view, it is very clear that there's an attempt to control us far more. And I think the last thing, the way that lockdown in certain parts was handled by the police. Unfortunately, it was shocking to see. Very recently, it's hardly a few weeks ago, we again saw police arresting people for not wearing masks outside, that type of thing. There are these draconian steps to control the innocent when you've got basically criminals ruling, and I'm being very outspoken when I say that, and you've got crime and other far bigger issues completely rampant on the outside, but we're focusing on making sure that someone is, geez, just please wear your mask, Joe. You need to make sure that you wear your mask, otherwise it will be the end of the world. I hope that wraps it up from my side, but to me, it's about complete centralization and government control.
Absolutely. And again, I hate to sort of, because it might sound a little circular, that we keep revisiting this point, and a lot of people have sort of accused me, you're always talking about this, Big Daddy Liberty. Why are you always talking about this? And I've got to remind people, guys, this is your freedom that we're talking about. This is your liberty that we're talking about. If you do not understand yet what I'm about and what this entire platform that I'm building and I've built is all about, then by God, unsubscribe, shut everything down, no longer watch my content. If you really fail to understand that I am a proponent and advocate for your freedom, the very thing which, by the way, we have taken for granted as humanity, because it's, we are beneficiaries as this generation of previous generations who have fought and died, in many cases, massive wars to guarantee the very freedoms that we enjoy today. Do not give them away. Do not give them away, pardon me, in such a trifling manner simply because you're fearful of a virus that has a 94% recovery rate, 99% worldwide. So, guys, I have to keep reasserting this point, especially on the show, because people love to take their freedom for granted because they simply assume, wrongly, that this government cares about their freedom. When this government has shown us, Rob, that it has no problem infringing upon our freedoms, including sicking the state security elements, as Ian rightly pointed out, on citizens. How quickly we forget how under the hard lockdown, citizens were being made to do frog marches. Some were being beaten, others killed by the security forces, by people who cared nothing for our freedoms.
Yes, I know. It's a grave concern. I think so, because people don't actually understand where this is going to end up. It might have started off, and I truly believe this is the case. It started off as an initiative to line the pockets of big pharma through coercing governments into accepting vaccines, enforcing vaccines on citizens, and then getting those citizens who are taxpayers to pay for the vaccines. Because you mustn't think they're free, of course. The government pays for them with our tax money. But it might have started off as an initiative to enrich big pharmaceutical companies, and I still believe that is the main driver. However, governments across the world, big corporates across the world, have taken advantage of the situation, and they have used it to drive their agendas which they've been struggling to put forward for in some cases decades. And it's pretty obvious where you can see in certain parts of the world where it's moving away from democracy and to pure authoritarianism. And that's a major concern, and that's where your freedoms start to erode. It's not I don't want to have a vaccine, and that's my choice and that's my freedom. It's got nothing to do with the freedom of choosing to be vaccinated or not. It's the bigger picture behind that. It starts with a small erosion of your ability to make a choice, and then gradually goes into absolutely everything else, and then you won't have any rights as you remember them. And it's no more clear again than that the goalposts keep shifting in the definitions of fully vaccinated. The fully vaccinated will have rights and they can continue normal society, but you're not fully vaccinated anymore. So you no longer have those rights that we promised you, and you almost had, but not just out of your reach. And I'm afraid to say will always be out of reach. And we've seen governments across the world now talking about booster shots every 3 to 6 months. That means you can only be fully vaccinated for 3 months at the most, or 6 months at the most. And that's it. And then you're no longer fully vaccinated. How long will that go on for? It's total control, absolute total control. And I promise you, this is just the beginning, and it's a precursor to your total erosion of absolutely everything that you hold dear to yourself.
Can I also add something to that? Because
and I know Joe agrees with me on that.
No, I agree with you 100%. But what also worries me is not just the government, but also the businesses. Yeah. Because there's so many businesses out there. The government's basically made it where, okay, we're not really going to decide. I mean, Cyril even said when he was away on his little tour of Africa, he said, I'm going to leave it up to the people to decide. Because what they've done is they've made it so that businesses now have to decide whether they're going to enforce mandatory vaccines or not. There's already been some businesses like Discovery and other businesses that have already done it. And I wonder how long it's going to take before South Africans start making those businesses feel the pinch. Because like I said before, 70% of people in South Africa don't want the vaccine. That's the ones that actually partook in that little survey. Now, that means that 70% of customers of a business are not going to partake in that business if they have to be vaccinated. So surely some businesses, maybe not the big corporate ones that get subsidized by the government, but other businesses, small businesses, surely they have to fight back. Surely they need to fight back and say, hey, we're going to stand on the side of liberty here, where people get to decide and try and stand up against the government. And I'm wondering how long that's going to take, because I think that the moment businesses start telling the government, hey, we're not gonna stand for your BS here. That's when the government might actually start to change their ways. Maybe they're waiting to see the pushback on that. I don't know. But I'm sure at some point, people are going to start, other businesses feel the pinch. And I think once the businesses start noticing that they're losing money, things might change. Thoughts?
Well, I think
Guys,
so too.
Absolutely. Just give me a moment here just to remind my viewers. Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good evening. Shalom. Welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends. Remember, hit that like button. Do it right now. I see the numbers are trickling up quite nicely. The house is packed. And with that being said, my likes are nowhere near where they should be. Guys, remember, I want that 50% engagement. There's about 280, nearing 290 of us watching here. Hit that like button. Every time you hit that like button, a child in Southeast Asia will send a SMS to a child in East Africa asking them if they can send a food parcel. None of that is true, but what is true that you should be hitting that like button. Welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends. I'm in conversation with Ian Cameron from Action Society SA. There he is in the bottom left, my left-hand corner. Rob Hutchinson, the MD of DSA. There he is, a Tadapra Rob. And of course, Joe Emilio, host of the Joe Emilio Show. Welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends. We're in that last hour of the show. Fellas, you know, even as we pivot to the next topic, I don't want us to lose sight of the COVID grift because it really is a grift. It's become a grift on the one hand, pardon me, by those who seek power, and also a grift by those who seek to line their pockets. And to that particular effect, one of the interesting developments we saw this week was these testing companies were hauled over the coals by the Competition Commission. Now, let's leave aside for a moment one's particular convictions around there being a competition commission. But with that being said, here's the Competition Commission saying, hey, man, the price you guys are charging for these PCR tests, that's the test where they basically rape your face with a swab, literally it seems collusive. It seems like you guys have kind of behind a back door, whether indirectly or directly, agreed on a price, and it's a rather exorbitant one. I mean, there are South Africans paying between 800 and 900 rand per test, some of whom are being asked to test regularly, for example, if they're travelers. And between 900 and 800 rand, guys, is not chump change. So the Competition Commission comes in, investigates, then says, no, you guys must drop your price to 500 rand. I see 2 labs have agreed to this. Rob, let me come to you because to an extent, I've been saying this for a very long time. This virus literally became an opportunity for many in the medical fraternity, you know, the establishment, as I broadly call them, to literally grift and make a quick buck.
Yeah, it certainly did. And they have certainly made a quick buck, and a major quick buck. I think estimates were around about 8 billion rand at Lancet has made, which is quite insane. And it's absolutely ridiculous. But the question is, why were the prices so high in the first place? 850 rand for a PCR test is absolutely ridiculous. And if you look at the actual price of a PCR test, and it seems odd that government was so keen to jump on the likes of Dis-Chem and other certain pharmacies who were supplying PPE because they had inflated their prices like they should be able to if there's a shortage. But why didn't they jump on the labs and say, hang on, you're charging way too much for this? Was there some nefarious thought behind that? Or some connected people are making money on the sideline as well? Well, given the reputation of our government and past track record, we can only assume so. So I think, you know, if there was any credible journalists out there, they should be investigating that whole matter. Follow the money and let's find out why we are, number one, even paying for PCR tests in the first place. Doesn't make sense.
Can I jump in there?
Jump in.
I just want to mention one thing, and I want to add to what Rob said in his previous comment, as well what Joe said. why would we suddenly trust the government? We haven't trusted them for more than the past decade. They've literally bankrupted the country. They stole every single bit of tax money that they could get their hands on. It's as simple as that. The ANC is definitely the biggest criminal cartel that will ever govern in South Africa, in my opinion, and I stand to be corrected. And people might say, geez, how can you say something so drastic? Well, prove me otherwise. Prove me wrong. I'm waiting for the day where they can show me that they were ethical and that Bekitele meant to keep people safe in South Africa. That Cyril Ramaphosa stood up against Jacob Zuma for looting tax money. That Ronald Lamola was able to actually run the Justice Department. And so the list just goes on and on and on. Why would we suddenly trust him? And then I read this absolute nonsense that Adrian Basson writes, saying that, Cyril is a hero. He's done so well. He's handled the whole thing. And it really makes me nauseous. It's absolutely absurd. People need to understand, whether it's with this or with crime or with potholes, you are on your own. If you do not organize your community, mobilize your community, work together with your neighbors, the people around you, take hands with different cultural organizations and groups in South Africa, you will not win the fight. If you're purely going to rely on government, you cannot be successful. It just cannot work. It sounds like in an ideal world we want that, but they have not once allowed for us to trust them because their actions proved otherwise every single time. I mean,
Absolutely.
Let's take this one last comment. Cyril Ramaphosa and the current government had an absolutely immaculate opportunity to prove how they could actually do things right when the whole COVID thing started. They had an opportunity. I remember I just remember Twitter that first night that Cyril had one of his supposed family meetings. And I remember how people said, oh, we're so proud of the president, the things that he's saying. And it was just incredible. And then 2 days later, you couldn't buy a chicken pie at Woolies anymore. It just, the wheels just came off, and you dare not buy sandals where your feet are open. Yeah, it's wrong. And the list goes on. The point is just, they haven't allowed for us to trust them. Why would we suddenly do it now?
Absolutely. And to the particular point, Ian, about communities banding together and doing things for themselves. I mean, look at that comment on the screen by Wendy Sornell, speaking exactly to that particular point. And this is what South Africans need to do: band together and remind the establishment, remind the political elites that they do not control your life. They do not control you. You have bodily autonomy. You are your own. You are responsible for you, damn it. And sometimes it takes a slight moment of confrontation to remind the political elites that they do not control us. We are free agents. We're human beings, damn it. With that being said, let me move our conversation on, guys, just as I keep an eye on time. Remember, guys, please hit that like button. The numbers are trickling up, but those likes are not going up. And that's not good, guys. Please get that like engagement up to 50%. Even if you want to hit the dislike button, as long as my engagement is over 50%. Speaking about something I like a lot, Francesca Harbour, shout out to you, girl, for that $50 super chat. That is a massive, massive, massive contribution. Thank you so much to you, Francesca. I super, super appreciate it and appreciate the love being shown. And I do see Upra Borgster, the Borgster, coming through with a 200 Rand super chat. And the question, with that being said, BDL, have you seen any of Dr. John Campbell's videos on the Omicron variant? Remember, Omicron, douchey by design, and what it really is. If not, you absolutely have to watch them, especially on his analysis on the SA situation. Borgster, I will check that out. I will definitely check that out. Reminder, unfortunately, that I cannot at times cover topics as freely as I want to on the social media platforms because of the demonetizing, because of the shadow banning of these pages. In fact, on Facebook already, I'm being shadow banned. So when I say hit that like button, I really mean it. It helps get the show out and about. Guys, let me move us on, please, just so that we can keep it cooking with grease tonight. One of the things that I really want us to chew on for a moment, and we'll be brief here because it's more of a funny haha type thing. And speaking about haha, this particular character that we're going to speak about is synonymous and known for giggling his way through 9 years of a South African presidency. That's one Jacob Zuma, who now has launched a tell-all biography and book. At 300 Rand a pop, I question how many South Africans will be buying that. But here you have a situation, Rob, where the former president of the country is threatening to tell all in this book. I haven't read it myself, but I've seen some headlines suggesting that he's already taking pot shots at the current president of the republic, calling him a directionless leader. Is that not just delicious irony?
well, it is, but given the current situation, we have to actually consider there might be some truth behind that. Who was the better president anyway? Well, I know who was the better entertainer. That's for sure, and it was definitely Zuma. And I think we all had a good chuckle when he did release his book, because we know for sure that he certainly didn't write it. So who actually did? It must have been a shadow writer, of course, but will he reveal all in a book? No, I don't know. Maybe they should place it in the fiction section, as we never know really if it is an autobiography or just something that's totally made up. If he certainly wanted to reveal all, I'm sure he would not have waited for a book release to do so. So. I would take it with a pinch of salt. I think it's all just hype, and we know he's desperate for money. So I don't know. I certainly won't be reading it that way.
I hope, Rob, he didn't do the page numbering. It's not going to go well. And I think you're pretty guaranteed that it's going to be the fairy tale of the decade. So, I think people are just going to buy it for a coaster on a coffee table or something, just to say they've got it. It's like that book. I don't know if you guys seen that book where it shows what the ANC has done in the last 10 years blank, or something. Yeah. And you literally flip through it and it's blank. In fact, that doesn't even have page numbers.
Yeah. Well, seriously, Ian, you got to. I'm sure there's a chapter called Chapter 1, Listen Properly. Chapter 2.
Voila. Joe, let me bring you in here because for me, there is a slightly funny component to this, of course, but also a bit of a dangerous one because, there are people who genuinely indulge this man's fantasies. To an extent, we saw this play out during the Zuma riots, the Zuma/July riots, where there was a faction of the ANC who really believe what this man and the narrative around him of him being a victim is all about. And my sense in this man releasing his autobiography now is that it's literally going to be page after page after page of a victim narrative and a false painting of its idea that when he was in charge or at the helm of things, South Africa was just wonderful. It was on the up and up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I couldn't agree more with Ian and Rob. Like, this is going to be it's going to be a page turner, just so you can laugh at every paragraph that is written. But I think it is dangerous because there are going to be those serfs, if you will, or simps rather, of Zuma, the simps of Zuma that are going to lap it up, and it's almost going to be like their Zuma Bible, where they're going to be like, see, he's innocent. This is like, we told you, he had nothing to do with any of this. It's all so. Look, I'm willing to bet you that I know the premise and the plot of this book. He's going to blame everything on Cyril. That's what it's going to be. Cyril's going to be his scapegoat. He's going to say that Cyril's the mastermind behind everything, and he's the victim because Cyril plotted to get him out of the ANC and all that stuff. And that's pretty much how it's going to play out in the book, which is laughable at best in just that little plot. It should be. I'm waiting until they say that they're going to make a movie out of it. I think it's going to be another comedy worth seeing. Definitely.
But guys,
Morgan Freeman.
But guys, as we taper off this conversation, there is a bit of political analysis that I want us to chew on when it comes to this book, and Joe's kind of touched on it, which is victimhood really sells in this country in a political sense. If one remembers how Jacob Zuma's ascendancy to the throne was positioned, was placed, was on the basis of victimhood. I think there is a keen appreciation by those who may have drafted this book on his behalf that, you know, in the search for relevance, as Rob rightly pointed out at the beginning, that this man has to be cast as the victim because there may very well be sharks circling the ANC there. I'm sure they've sniffed blood and they've seen the ANC's losing the political imperative, the political power rather. And they're probably thinking life post ANC as to who is at the control of that party, whether it's a carcass of itself or a party that then goes into coalition with someone else in order to get back into power. Who knows? The point is there is a jostling at this point politically, and of course positioning certain individuals as having been victims who then have to be rewarded with power because they can fix things. Rob?
Yeah, without a doubt. And I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a book following up on a book from Ace Magashule, Ace in the Hole, or something to that effect. But you're right. I see it as another form of propaganda, and it's definitely to drive the factional issue, as somebody actually correctly pointed out here in the comments. There's no doubt that that is what it is. And like I said, just take it with a pinch of salt. There's no substance to it. If there was, it would have been charges laid, or he would have used it with political intent. Putting it out as a book is definitely not going to create any political interference or anything else. And we saw that with Jacques Pauw's book as well. It creates a lot of hype, but it's entertainment at the end of the day. Nothing ever really comes from it. So yeah, as far as having political influence, I don't think it will have any at all.
Absolutely. Fellas, let me move us on. And again, you know, if you're watching the show, welcome to it. We've reached the actual halfway mark of the Liberty and Friends show. Remember, this is a 90-minute show, your week-ending news analysis show with opinion you'll hear nowhere else except here. Welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends. We're moving on to another topic, which I think really, Ian, I'm going to let you open up with a few salvos in this direction because you're doing absolutely excellent work in supporting the South African gun-owning community who are quite literally under assault, not only by the criminals on a day-to-day basis who have prompted many of us to become gun owners, but also from the state who are looking to remove this, what they call privilege, but what I call a right for South Africans to own a firearm. You, in this particular regard, are doing fantastic work with the Firearms Gaurdian. What is the Firearms Gaurdian, Ian? Can you just talk us through it?
Yeah, thanks, Cicely. I've actually spoken to Rob about it quite a bit. The thought basically came from the following. So I don't know if you guys remember the parliamentary question that Peter Groenewald asked a while ago, where he wanted to know how many rounds of ammunition the police had lost in, I think it was 6 years, and also firearms. And long story short, it was something like 10 million rounds of ammo. And that just got me thinking, you know, we hear these horrific things happening to often state-owned firearms. And this isn't about pointing fingers to anyone. The point is just there's zero or no control. But then I very often hear that the normal law-abiding citizen that uses his or her firearm to defend themselves or their families and to do it within the framework of the law are then often not supported properly in terms of legal support. They don't have guaranteed legal help. And we then went and spoke with a few organizations, companies, etc. And a specific insurance underwriter, and I want to give them credit for it, Genric is an incredible company, who said, but wait a minute, we want to see how we can support law-abiding citizens. And they then worked with us with Firearms at ZA to build basically a legal protection package that legal firearm owners and obviously law-abiding citizens can have access to make sure that they've got guaranteed legal cover for a small amount per month if they were to defend themselves. So I think the game changer in this is people have always insured firearms. They've had a bit of liability cover that helps them with hunting accidents, etc. We now do all of that. We do the liability cover, etc. But our focus is to really support the law-abiding firearm owner out there. And if something were to happen to them, they are guaranteed to have up to 300,000 rands worth of legal cover, and the same thing for liability cover. So I think the aim of it, I think a lot of people might think it's just another product that a big commercialized product. But I think the brainchild, or rather the thought behind it was also added during the July riots. Not so much because of I guess to a certain extent, communities having to defend themselves, but rather the fact that I just realized once again, and I knew it before, but I saw once again that we really are on our own often when it comes to crime. And we are fortunate in South Africa, and people might say it's not always enforced right, and I might agree. We're fortunate enough to have legislation that allows us to defend ourselves. And we've got remarkable training institutions. I mean, I was speaking to Gideon Uber again in the last week, the work that he does, groups like Fortis Defense, Lone Operator, etc. There are just so many fantastic training organizations. There's such a wealth of experience in the country. So we're saying, get trained, get legally armed, make sure you know what the legal framework is within which you can work. And we encourage people to join Firearms Gaurdian.
Absolutely. Sorry, I just had myself muted there. But absolutely. And again, I echo the sentiments that are coming through here in the comment section. Absolutely great work, Ian. This is the sort of ethos, this is the sort of Mazakele ethos, if you will, that we should be pushing. The idea that South Africans should do things for themselves, do things on your own. Don't wait for permission, even in most cases. Ian, we're going to stick with this issue because I think it'll have broader consequences in terms of the average South African who's looking to become a firearms owner. And let me quickly shout out, this is not a paid endorsement at all, but I want to quickly shout out the fellas out at Ihau Firearms Center in KZN. They are who I will be doing my firearms training with. There they are over there, and there's my little handgun training manual. Shout out to the Ihau Training Center, and I'll actually link their information in the descriptor of this video. If you're in Durban area, please make sure that you get in touch with them and get yourself your competency, get your training and your competency, become a legal, lawful firearm owner, a sober, moral, please, firearm owner in this country, because we need more of those. As Ian rightly pointed out, that when the chips were down, it was those sober, moral, responsible individuals with firearms who stood up and defended their communities. And I want to unpack this a little bit more, Ian, because I think this initiative is super important. And I want to put it on screen here. Shout out to Lars Solis for all the information. There you are. You can find, of course, the initiative on that particular website, which is on the bottom of the screen at the moment. Ian, let me come back to you, and I'll come to the rest of you guys in a moment. There is a story to be told here, isn't there? Insofar as a South African gun owner who for a very long time was feeling under assault, for a very long time feeling almost alone even when it comes to the issue of firearms ownership. And I framed the initial introduction of this topic in the context of the war, the battle rather, on two fronts that they're battling. On the one hand, it really is battling a criminal underbelly in this country who have no fear of law enforcement and have no regard for the rule of law, period. And not only that, they have no regard for human life. Human life for them is cheap, and if anything, it is in the way of them making their profits as criminals. You have the gun owner who's facing that one side of the battle, and on the other side, who's facing a political elite. So we're facing a criminal elite on the one side and a political elite on the other. Often we can't even distinguish between the two. But anyway, but it's these two sectors that we're battling here, Ian, and often friends are very few in the sector. Talk to me about this initiative insofar as how do people sign up, number one, and on a practical level, what does it mean to be a member, if I can call it a member, of the Firearm Guardian?
Yeah, so I just want to give even more context, Sikla. I think you might get irritated with me for keep on referring back to, but I think just, let's stand still with the current 16 days of activism against gender-based violence and violence against women and children. Again, I had a chat with Rob about this the other day. Do you know that in South Africa, we have about 250 rapes per day? Those are the ones that we know of, okay? Only 1 in 9 get reported. Now imagine, and I've said this many times before, if you were able, and the majority of those victims are women, if you were able to train all of those women in knowing how to defend themselves within the framework of the law with a firearm, how you would be able to equal the so-called playing field. It's remarkable. You're really then giving power to the people without any weird stereotype about it, and you're helping them empower themselves, helping them help themselves. Now, in a country, in places like, for example, I was in Lavender Hill on Friday in the Cape Flats, and I see the suffering that the police have there, where cops have more than 450 dockets on their tables. It's physically impossible for a cop to handle all of that. And you've got a community that are not empowered, very often empowered to be able to defend themselves. We need to empower them to do that. So from an Action Society point of view, and from Firearms.co.za and a Firearms Guardian point of view, it's crucial for us to say, we encourage you to get trained, know what you can and can't do. Firearms Guardian, which I think I've explained in enough, where it came from, basically gives you the opportunity where you can go onto firearms.co.za, you click on Firearms Guardian, and you can then choose. You can either join up for 135 Rand a month or 245 Rand per month, and you basically then have a 24/7 line, a direct line to a whole team of legal experts. So we've got 2,500 lawyers in the country that's part of this panel. We guarantee that you're not going to speak to a paralegal. You've got someone with a minimum of 5 years worth of experience, someone immediately answer. And whether it is that you are being charged, for example, many a time we hear that someone defended him or herself and they're charged with murder or attempted murder, etc. If you've got a licensed firearm and you acted within the framework of the law, we jump in, we make sure you get that legal support as quickly as possible. So for the 135 Rand, you get 100,000 Rand worth of legal cover per case, and also liability cover per year for the same amount. And for 245, you get 300,000 Rands worth of legal cover. I think to emphasize, Sikle, Rob, and Joe, I think the game changer here is the fact that you are supported when it comes to self-defense. From what I know and what we could find out with the underwriters and the different companies that have jumped in to support legally armed citizens, we couldn't find any product, any organization that really comes forward with this type of option. So we really went out to see what we can do to support the average law-abiding armed citizen. I think the other thing that we must say, and I think it's very important, is that there are many emotional debates and things that I could possibly have about firearms, and that I could say, we need to make sure people are trained and armed, etc. But what do we really do to give them something in hand, something that really is going to support them when they need it? So I think this is a first for South Africa that really puts something in the individual's hand. It's not just, for example, let's call it a class lawsuit for a bigger fight, which is also important. But this also empowers the individual on the ground with a very large national network that's immediately available And I think it could be of great help. Obviously, when it comes to something like hunting and sport shooting, we also do cover for that, and it's included. But again, the main focus of Firearms Guardian is to protect you in order for you to be able to protect your family. And the last thing I want to say, Sikli, is I often repeat, if you can protect yourself, you can protect your family. Once you can protect your family, you can defend your neighbors. And when neighbors defend each other, they can protect a community. And that's the mindset we want to build with Firearms Guardian.
Absolutely, Ian. I'm not going to let you go that easily. I've got a question here, but from Tanya Edwards. Look, she's multitasking at the moment. She's not a gun owner. She's wondering, should I get one? And I also want to pose another question here from Stevie E, who says, oh, hang on, isn't this a bit of the same setup as GOSA, for example?
Yeah, so Tanya, I'm very biased. So yes, get a gun. Let's be blunt about it. But that being said, it is a big responsibility, and you need to make sure that you are trained with it, that you shoot often, that you spend time on a range, that you're comfortable with that firearm, and that you understand the responsibility that goes with it. Remember, if you pull that trigger, you need to know that it could take a life, and you need to be that serious about it. I think very often people romanticize violence. They very often romanticize guns, and I also like a good-looking shotgun, etc. You know, there's something about it, but it's a major responsibility. So I must emphasize that. In my opinion, especially for women in South Africa, the more women that get armed and trained, we're going to see a decrease in some serious violent crime. And I think we might just see a decrease in some domestic violence as well, because we are currently we're the rape capital of the world, no doubt. And I think we could actually change that quite a bit. And you'd be surprised, very often one would think that it's a random perpetrator that comes up to a woman and does horrific things to her. But more than 60 or 70% are known to the perpetrator or then the victim. So this could really help women to also understand that they can look after themselves, they can defend themselves, and even if it saves one life, it's one life that hasn't been destroyed. In terms of the GOSA question, I wouldn't say this replaces a GOSA or a Saga, etc. And I think it's crucial, the work that Paul Oxley at GOSA and the team, Damien Enslin at Saga. And I want to give a massive shout out to Jonathan Deal at Safe Citizen. The work that these, and I'm sorry for not mentioning CHASA and the whole list, there are many great organizations, but I wouldn't say that this is a replacement for that. This is simply something that's going to protect you as an individual with a decent, proper insurance product that's going to look after you if something were to happen. So it's as simple as that. It's often the question that you get in terms of rural safety as well. Do I just join my local structure, or should I get involved in organized agriculture? And it basically is, you should try and do both. If you can afford it, do both, because the one is going to fight for example, they're going to lobby with policy changes, national debates in terms of legislation changes, etc. And the other one might be more involved in terms of the actual ground level incidents or problems you might face. That moment, what can you expect? You've pulled the trigger, a perpetrator or an intruder has been shot and wounded. What do you do? Who do you call? And I don't think people always think past that. What happens when the police arrive on scene? What do you do? What do you say? What do you not say? Who do you speak with? Etc. There's so many questions we can ask. So I don't think this should take away from any of the existing firearm organizations. In fact, from a Firearms Guardian point of view, we would love to actually take hands as far as possible and see how we can assist to strengthen the individual law-abiding citizen on ground level.
Sorry, can I ask Cameron a question as well? Sorry.
Just before you do, Joe, give me 2 seconds there. Sorry, I just hit that 9 p.m. Marker, which of course means there's 30 minutes left in the show. I'm going to open the lines to you, dear viewer. You can join in this conversation, preferably with a question, please, for the panel, especially with this wonderful initiative that Ian Cameron has just launched. You might be wondering, as a prospective gun owner, hey man, what's in it for me? So I'm going to open the lines to you guys. Just look out, please, in the comment section for that link. Remember, as usual, only 2 rules. Number 1, make sure you have a light in front of you, please. Make sure you have a light in front of you so we can see your face, which will bring me to rule number 2. You've got to be on camera. You've got to cam up so we can actually see you and, of course, hear you. Get your comments or, of course, questions in. We're in the last 30 minutes of Liberty and Friends. Joe, hit us, homie. What do you have in mind?
Cool. So this actually comes from the chats. I've been interacting with some of the people in the live chats on YouTube, and Michelle, I forgot her last name, but Michelle's having a discussion in the chats, and she's asking about CO2 guns. Can she get one of those? Is it just as effective? And also, what are the laws around that? Is it the same if you have a non-lethal weapon? Is it the same as having a lethal weapon? So what would you suggest, Ian? Do you think if people can't afford, because that was where the conversation kind of stemmed from, they were saying some people feel it's too expensive to get firearms. So they were asking, is there any alternatives? And that's where the whole CO2 conversation came in. So what's your comment on that? What would you suggest? And what are the laws like around that?
Joe, I think that's an awesome question. It's something that comes up quite a bit, and I know there's quite a debate about it. My personal opinion, if you can get trained and be lawfully armed with a proper firearm, I think it counts quite a bit. I think it gives you, it just gives you that much more power, I guess, if you're well trained with it, and you take responsibility for that very powerful tool that you can then use. It obviously is a help. I also say, and I've been criticized for saying it very often, because people say to me, but how can you encourage a lethal option if your life is under threat? But I say rather something than nothing. So if you're well trained and you can't afford a firearm and you know how to, for example, use a knife adequately, it can be a very, very potent self-defense tool, and you can save your life or the life of others. And it's definitely, I know of quite a few instructors that have told me before they'd rather go into a gunfight than a knife fight. So, you've got pretty dangerous, especially some of the ladies, they get quite feisty with a knife. So it's definitely not something I would encourage my wife to do. But anyway, so I think if we can, if we can encourage people to at least do something, it's good. The CO2, let's call them guns for lack of a better word. It's not a real firearm. I actually had a discussion with a lady earlier today that had just bought a CO2 type of gun that takes about 6 or 7 rounds. It's got some pepper in it. It's got some solids and so on. And I've seen from something like crowd control, riot control, that many of those types of guns, obviously with more rounds, really can do quite a bit of good work. It really does a big pushback on a serious threat. Where some of the police firearms, especially the shotguns with the rubber that they use, it's quite laughable to see that they often don't even reach 15 meters if you shoot that round into the air. So long story short, I would encourage the real deal, and with decent training. But again, if rather something than nothing.
Absolutely. I think there is an imperative to get into here. And I see you, Chris, in the panel. I'll bring you on in a moment. Because Chris, funny enough, is not funny, but like actually apt enough, is former military, and he'll have great insight onto this particular topic, especially from an American perspective, where they, for example, have gun ownership as an actual right. It's encoded in their constitution. But the one thing I wanted to say quickly before I get Chris on is you've got to remember, guys, if you're watching this show right now, that a firearm is not a panacea in and of itself. We're not saying just go out there and get a gun. The training component is critically important. Immersing yourself in a gun community, a gun owning culture, especially with guys who are maybe are regulars at the range. These are people who you need to get to know, firearms instructors don't just suddenly abandon them once you get your firearm. Work often with them. They often run very awesome training packages. One guy mentioned on here is Gideon Hubert, who does exactly this. I share a lot of his content online of these various programs and training sessions that he puts in place. The recent one they did, I believe, is how to effectively use your firearm in a self-defense scenario where you're in your car in the evening. I mean, it's those sort of scenarios which, if you get regular training, you become more proficient, will actually save your life. But guys, get yourself a firearm. Don't sit on your bum and think that, someone is going to save you. No one is going to save us, dear South Africans. We are on our own. Speaking about no longer being on our own, dear panelists, I want to bring Ubra Chris, the Colonel, there he is, Chris White, onto the show. Chris, good evening, homie. How are you doing?
Hey, Big Daddy Liberty, gents, how's it going? I can't find my window, so I got to move my windows around now because you're on the other screen. Hang on. Anyway, listen, I didn't call in to be a panel member, but thank you for that. I'll hang around if you'd like me to. But I did actually call in with a question for Ian, a legitimate question from a South African perspective. So let me just cover that very quickly. So I've had a number of viewers over the past year or so tell me, either in private or during streams, that their firearm was confiscated by the police, either as a consequence of a charge leveled against them. Many times the charge had no merit to it, was dismissed, but they never recovered their firearm. When they went to give, the police said, "Oh, we don't have it," or something like that, or refused to return it. Not to mention the number of police stations seen reported this year in which they've been broken into and their armories have been raided as a consequence, people turning in their firearms for registration, things like that. Is there any recourse or any way to protect yourself from this nonsense? I mean, that's the worst thing I can think of is you have a firearm, you're a licensed user, you are charged with a crime, either because maybe there's good reason to think you did something, or it's fraudulent, whatever the case is. You surrender your firearm while you go through this process, and then it's just gone, or they refuse to give it back to you. That's a very frightening prospect for a law-abiding citizen. Ian, I think that probably you might be best to answer that question.
Yeah, Chris, it's definitely not a simple matter. It's something there's a massive problem with the firearm registry in South Africa. I know for a fact that the South African Police Service don't even know the exact amount of firearms they have, and no one has really been able, from their side, to accurately say how many legal gun owners there are in South Africa. We've got a good idea, a good estimate, but we don't know the exact numbers. In terms of bringing them to book and keeping them accountable, the most reasonable answer that I've seen and that I've experienced was just purely following up and being a pain. That was the major thing, is just really being consistent in asking questions, saying how far is the investigation, where's my firearm, etc., etc. And that was the main way of being successful. I think the big problem that I experience, especially in rural areas in South Africa, is that you simply don't always get an answer. You've got cops that literally don't even show up for work. You've got a DFO, which is a firearm officer, doesn't show up when it comes to something like license applications, etc. So you've got a major problem just in terms of the human resource management in the police, never mind the firearms themselves. In terms of forensic, ballistic testing, etc., major backlog in the country at the moment, and I don't think it's going to be resolved within the next 12 months. So point being, you need to be very, very consistent, making sure that you renew licenses on time, that you do your competency, etc. Make sure your side of it is clean. I must say, in my experience, the majority of times, people seem to get okay service. You get your firearm license. I haven't heard of someone getting it on time in a very long time, but at least you get it. A lot of people are waiting. It's difficult to say where the exact bottleneck is. We've seen the photos. Chris, I think you and I actually spoke about it a while ago, the photos of the firearm registry, the backlog there, but that's not the only bottleneck in the system. The last thing I think it's important mentioning is a major challenge, and for that I don't know the answer yet, is when you do have a case where, say, for example, a shot was fired by a law-abiding citizen. This is where Firearms Gaurdian will also jump in, and they take your firearm for ballistic testing. And now they've taken the very firearm that you need to use to defend yourself. Maybe some of the suspects ended up escaping. Now you're left defenseless, and you're stuck in that same place with suspects knowing what you have and don't have, and you're waiting on the police to one day give back your firearm. So we aim to assist in that regard with the whole legal process around that, but it's not foolproof. And unfortunately, Chris, to be very honest, I think in terms of law enforcement in that regard, South Africa is still in for a very, very rough ride, and we need to see what we can do from a civilian point of view to safeguard communities and to see how we can, let's call it, ring fence law-abiding citizens.
That's kind of frightening, Ian.
Let me jump in here,
Sorry.
fellas, and just to remind our viewers that we're nearing that the last 15 minutes of the show. If you want to join us on the show, that link is in the comment section, whether you're watching this simulcast on Twitter, Facebook, or on YouTube. Welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends. We're in the last 15 minutes or so of the show. We've just been joined by UPRA Colonel Chris White, of course, who is the host of his own show. Make sure you chat and catch that, please, on his... You are back on YouTube, Chris. I remember you're sort of removed and...
My 17-year-old channel without a single complaint against it was removed over a video that wasn't on my channel in April. 2 days later, I was back up. My 22,000 subscribers, gone away. I was actually briefly ahead of you, I think, at one point last year, and then fell behind after my channel was blocked. I got about 5,200 people on the new channel, and also I maintain a presence on other platforms. And there might be some breaking news of a different separate activity coming very soon. I'm holding off on that, but right now, about 5,200 people on YouTube, but they don't get notified. Tanya was here in the chat earlier. She says, I never get notifications. That's why I encourage everybody, if you like Big Daddy Liberty, if you like Joe Emilio, if you like these folks, you need to get on announcement groups that they have, whether it's on WhatsApp or Telegram or Signal, whatever they use. I use Telegram because Telegram doesn't reveal your mobile number. You can hide it, so you have privacy. That's the reason I don't have a WhatsApp announcement group, because some people like their privacy. They don't want their mobile number shared. So you can join the Chris White Africa Announcements group, and there's one for Roman Kabanek's channel and others as well. Maybe some of you guys have them. And there you get only person can contribute is me, so you only get announcements from me in that group. And so then you always get notified when my programs are on, because YouTube, or PooTube as I call it, doesn't notify people.
Awesome. There you have it. Guys, I'm just going to scan the comment section just so I can get some questions in, if there are any. And with that being said, I am going to move us along a little bit to what I think should be the final topic tonight, but there will be an open mic-ish, depending on the questions that come in. And we're more than happy to come back to this firearms issue, guys, if we have a bit of time.
I'm sorry, may I add just one comment about the firearms, since I wasn't part of the panel, just very quickly before you get to it?
Sure, go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. I said Joe's smiling. He knew I was going to do this. Okay, so listen, a firearm in the hands of a fool is more dangerous than no firearm. It really is. Just look at the Michigan school shooting with irresponsible parents who didn't lock away a firearm properly and glorified the firearm with this teenage child rather than teach him respect for a firearm. So when you're talking about getting a firearm, you're not getting to get a gat and go out there and shoot it on the neighborhood. It's a serious thing. Just like an automobile, it can alter a person's life. You got to respect for others and treat it like a weapon. That's all I want to say. Thanks, Big Daddy. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. No, you're spot on, though, Chris. I mean, you're absolutely spot on, especially in a country like ours, where often this is the common refrain you'll hear, especially from the anti-gun lobby in this country. If we give guns to women, they'll say, then just women will shoot every man. Or again, I'm being purposefully hyperbolic because some of the arguments they make are hyperbolic. Or my personal favorite is, if you give a gun to people, then it'll just be snatched out of their hands, and bad people will use them against them. Like, no, we this is why we advocate for training, proficiency, and responsible usage, and encouraging sober, moral, and really good people to become firearms owners. Guys, I don't want to be bogged down here too much, because there is one more issue that I want us just to chew on very quickly. This today, or was it yesterday? Hang on, let me just double check my dates here. Okay, now I've just lost my notes. Yes, it was today, Sunday morning. The South African dignitaries, family members, and of course friends bid farewell, to the former president, F.W. de Klerk, at a state memorial service. This was in, of course, Cape Town at die Grote Kerk in, I think it's on Adley Street, if I'm not mistaken. The president, of course, Cyril Ramaphosa, delivering a eulogy in that. And I must be honest, the eulogy was actually relatively good insofar as he rightly pointed out that F.W. de Klerk played a role, a very important one, in ushering in, ending apartheid, firstly, and then ushering in this country's democratic dispensation. Rob, I must come to you because it seemed as though there was two, even as I say this, right outside that church, there was a small gaggle, no more than 3 or 5 people, I think, who then came to protest with the usual rhetoric of, oh, he has blood on his hands. And, he didn't really end apartheid. The ANC led us into this wonderful nirvana that we call our democracy today. But really, that lacks the sort of historical context that is required at a time like this.
Yeah, totally. I mean, but what people seem to forget is that to end a conflict, it requires an agreement from both sides and a compromise from both sides. And that wouldn't have happened if it was anybody other than F.W. de Klerk. There's no doubt about that. If you look at the previous regimes and the way they handled the country and apartheid. So yeah, I think it's political games, no doubt raised by certain left-leaning, well, I shouldn't say left-leaning, but extreme left groups, notably the EFF, who have been very vocal about F.W. de Klerk and so on. And I think that's totally unjustified. What we have to look at here is the good. And it did create a good. It did change the course of this country, and it did create proper democracy. And we should be grateful for that, because the man wasn't around. It might have happened, it might not have happened, but it certainly wouldn't have happened when it did. We might still be sitting in an apartheid situation. So their protests are completely unjustified, in my opinion.
Can't hear, Sheila.
You blocked there.
Sorry, my bad. And I was just saying absolutely, because I want to bring this to Joe and then Ian very quickly. And I do see a question from Dino Vermaak. I'll get to that in a moment, Dino. I'll see you, homie, in the comment section. But here's the thing. I'm 35 this year. I turned 35 this year. I can safely say, having grown up in the late 80s and really most of my childhood through the 90s, that I'm a beneficiary of what the likes of your F.W. de Klerks, your Mandelas, your Mangosuthu Buthelezis effectively did in what was an incredibly violent time in this country. And take it from me as a child growing up in the township of Umlazi, where I saw in a very palpable, in a very real way, what that violence looked like. And it really was sober, moral, responsible leadership at the time that led this country into a relatively peaceful democracy. And I say relatively peaceful, guys, I'm aware of what I'm saying and the crime rate and the violence and all that. But I'm just making the point here from a political sense, a relatively peaceful transition. Joe, and then Ian?
Can I pass my mic on to Chris? Because I would really like to hear his opinion. I know he's got a rant waiting. I mean, it's going to be good for TV. Come on, Sikhli.
There's a reason I was leaving him for last to comment on this one.
I really got not much to say. I agree with everyone. I unfortunately wasn't around during apartheid in South Africa. I cannot really comment, but what I do know is that the horrible things that people are saying about F.W. de Klerk is just, he was a huge momentum for ending apartheid. He was willing to go into those negotiations and chat to Cyril. Yes, ANC did the People's War, but still, I think F.W. de Klerk isn't getting as much credit as he deserves by some of those individuals that just want to spread hate and try and change history. And all that. So yeah, that's really all I have to say.
Absolutely. And let me come to you, because very briefly, and I will end off with Chris on this one. This is not to say that we're saying, he was absolutely innocent, or that that's not the argument here. The argument really is, when someone passes on, we really should focus on the bigger picture of what their life meant for us who are still around. And the bigger picture really is, we live in a democracy where he, as a former president of apartheid, ended that system, often at the time in particular, facing massive pressure from the extreme right in particular, for them saying, hey man, forge ahead with this apartheid. And he actually bucked the trend and said, no, I will listen to what white South Africans are telling me at the moment, if you remember the referendum. And white South Africa is saying, let's end this nonsense and usher in something better.
So, Sikle, I've got two comments to make. I think the first one is that I think people very often, and the EFF being a leading factor of that, romanticize violence unnecessarily. It's very interesting that you often hear the people that are supposedly anti-gun, anti-firearm, etc., romanticizing conflict, and quoting bloodshed and how they will, break things down, burn things down, hurt people, and so on and so forth. There's nothing romantic about that. So I think if there was any way that some kind of a war could be stopped, where many more lives could have been taken, I would say it's a good thing. I am too young to know exactly every single dynamic of that time, so I'm careful to comment too much. I'm glad that apartheid is obviously over. I think it's an absolutely evil ideal. And that being said, I want to take just one thing tongue in cheek. I don't think I want a state funeral, to be honest. I've seen some of these guys marching, and they did not do a very good job. So I don't think it would necessarily be a good thing. But that being said, I also think just out of a respect point of view, no matter who the person is, when someone passes away, you treat their family and the people around them with respect. You do not need to agree with them politically. If it were to happen to a Bheki Cele, who is someone that I honestly do not like very much, I would treat him and his family with respect. And that includes Julius Malema. It includes many people that have said many horrible things and done bad things in this country. But you treat people with respect. So just a side comment. I think the things that I've seen being said, people celebrating someone's death in the way they do on social media, is just purely wrong. It's disrespectful, and that's not the type of leadership that we need in this country. We can differ. I encourage that. I encourage healthy debate. In fact, we need to really take each other on. But with something like that, we respect the family and we give them room to grieve.
Absolutely. Chris, let me come to you, and I'm seeing Matt enter the lobby here. Matt, will come to you. Just make sure, please, that you're on camera and that you have a light in front of you. Chris, I want you to sort of cap it off for us, because there is a conversation there to be had about the amnesia, the selective amnesia that we often see, especially in characters like de Klerk. And again, I must stress this. We're not absolving him of what bad he may have done in life. Just like equally, when Mandela died, I was quite frank at the time to say, look, these are human beings. They have a good, a bad, and an ugly to them. But one thing we do recognize, and I do agree with Ian on this particular part, is, when they pass on, there's still a family left behind that must deal with this particular loss. But, I wanted you to cap this particular point off for us about the selective amnesia in this circumstance, when there's a refusal by many quarters in the establishment to even recognize the good that this man did.
Well, yeah. As far as that, I think that it's fair to say there should be a little bit of respect when someone passes, but I think it's time limited. I don't think that Robert Gabriel Mugabe deserves a break at this point in history, and I'm very critical of Robert Gabriel Mugabe, the thug that he was, the lying sack of manure and cock that he was all his years in life. But race hustler extraordinary, lying sack of crap. Anyway, but as far as a state funeral, this wasn't a state funeral; it was a state memorial. So yeah, no, I mean, I think Ian meant that, but I said I'm not correct. I'm just saying for everyone else that's listening, it was a memorial service, not a funeral. The funeral has already been conducted. It was a family affair. And I think it's appropriate for the state to recognize the former president of South Africa and deputy president under the new dispensation. Now, the problem I have with this whole situation and with people like the EFF who go on about this is that they're selective choosing of history and their selective memory. As Rob said a little while ago, if it wasn't for F.W. de Klerk at that time, at that point in history, then apartheid wouldn't have ended. And for all you Monday morning quarterbacks that weren't deeply enmeshed in the Cold War like I was, and don't know what you're talking about, The reason it ended was in part because of F.W. de Klerk, but more, it also a big impetus for this was the end of the Cold War. There was no red menace anymore, and that was one of the reasons why the apartheid government was able to convince most of the white population that the security state that they had in place was protecting them from the Swat Khiva and the Hui Khiva, which were no longer in existence. We've proven that Black Africans can run countries, so that was disappearing. But the red threat was the menace that was gone. Now, whatever people want to accuse him of because he was a land minister or whatever he did in the past, that's fine. But I find it hypocritical and ludicrous for people to have this enmity, this detest, this hatred, and this rewriting of history for F.W. de Klerk as if he committed a murder. You know, the people who forgave the murderers of Amy Beale, who attacked this innocent American graduate student who was only helping colored people in the Cape Flats and people of color, and she was dragged from her car and beaten to death as they laughed and had hysterical joy over her pleas for help. She helped more people ever. Her own mother forgave the murderers. South Africans forgave the murderers. They were given a free pass in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And people treat actual murderers with more respect and dignity than they do the former head of state of South Africa, who was not a war criminal. He was not a criminal. And I know I'm not a big fan of F.W. de Klerk, but I am a historian. And I know what happened. I know the facts, I know the history. And by the way, I actually know some of the classified stuff that many of you don't know about. So I'm tired and sick of this nonsense, of this flagellation against this figure, a truly historical figure, whether you like him or not. South Africans need to get over themselves and their hatred for him betraying the Afrikaners or betraying the apartheid system or because he destroyed Black Africans. Stop it. The ANC's war of insurrection in KZN did far more damage to Black Africans, Black South Africans, than this gentleman ever did, even in the deepest of darkest of thoughts he might ever have had in his skull. And I'm just sick of it. Speaking of which, these are the same people who look the other way when Hannah Cornelius is gang raped and beaten to death and bludgeoned with a stone, and her colored mate is left for dead after they bludgeon him. These people have no respect for life. They deserve not an ounce of oxygen, those who complain about it. Now, I'm not talking about everybody complaining, but people in South Africa need to get over themselves and respect F.W. de Klerk and respect his role in history, no matter what he did before the end of apartheid. That's the reality. Let's accept him for a historical figure who won an actual Nobel Peace Prize, not the kind they hand out to Yasser Arafat and all these other tyrants since then.
What's the classified stuff?
Or even cheaply getting one like Obama did.
Not even president, for leading the world to peace and started more wars than George Bush, the man he railed against.
There you have
What's
it.
the classified stuff?
Fellas, we are effectively nearly out of time, and I do have a guest here, Matt, just waiting. Matt, I'm going to bring you on, homie. Please keep your question or your comment short, brother, because we are effectively out of time. Matt, good evening. Welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. I'm live on YouTube. That's interesting.
Welcome to it.
I follow all of you in some way. Joe, I don't follow you just yet, but here we are. Ian, thanks for all the work you're doing for South Africa and AfriForum. Rob, I follow and support DRSA. Chris, I've been following you as well. And BDL, you're a shining light in South African civil society. And I'd just like to thank you all for your service to South Africa. So my question, just to make it brief, is how do we get together? How do we join forces so to and make it a better place for all South Africans? I'm a patriot, a flag, faith and country kind of guy, and I just want to know, when I tell my friends, hey, I might be considering staying rather than emigrating, and they tell me I'm crazy. How do I convince them otherwise? That's my question.
Absolutely. Matt, thank you very much. Matt, where are you calling from, homie?
I'm in Johannesburg, yeah.
Awesome, my brother. That is Matt, brother, from Johannesburg. I think that's a good question. I'll venture a short response, and then Rob, I'll give it to you, Joe, and then Ian and the Colonel, just to wrap it up for us. And I must say we'll have to wrap it up here. But the question, Rob, really is an important one. There are South Africans who are patriots, as you rightly said. And if you watch the show, I'm absolutely crystal clear around the notion that we are a faith, flag, family, and freedom type South Africa. And what I mean by that flag notion is that we love this country, but we might not necessarily love its government, rightly so. But here's a question here where I want you to chew on. How does he approached this topic of that patriot, the guy who wants to stay, build something, build this nation, build the economy. You're muted, Rob. Let me just unmute you. Go ahead.
Well, it's a tough question because it's probably a very personal approach from most people. You've got to find that one element that you love about this country and that you're passionate about. If you look at too many different views, you're just going to get depressed and get upset and see the bad instead of the good. So narrow your point of vision first of all. Yes, have a look at the big picture and always consider that big picture, but narrow your point of focus to where your passion lies and spread that passion. Make sure that passion comes alive, and then assist your neighbors, and then assist your family, and then assist your community, and so on and so on. And then build up that same passion and deliver it to everyone else. But also be aware that there are differences of opinion. We live in a hugely diverse society, and we've got to be considerate and take the views of others into account as well, and understand that we have to compromise as much as other people in our situation do as well. And once we understand that, I think we'll unite as a nation. South Africans, we're a mixed breed of people from all over the world. We literally are the township dogs, if I can refer to it as that. Yeah. So we don't have a lineage to grasp onto other than this is South Africa. It's a beautiful country. It has massive potential, and we need to realize that and take our own role in the own way that we can.
Absolutely. And, Ian, I want to come to you very briefly because you've actually had this conversation with me on the show. And you're quite absolutely crystal clear around the notion of staying is almost completely hinged on our ability to build stronger communities than a strong reliance on the state. So I want to just throw that in there as you respond. And of course, just to quickly clarify that Ian is no longer with AfriForum. He's part of the Action Society SA guys, and of course, Firearms Gaurdian. Ian?
So I think I want to use the example of Golda Meir. I know that many people in Israel many years ago came to her and said, how are we going to survive? They kept on asking, how are we going to survive? We've got all these threats, we've got all these challenges, etc. And she said, don't worry, we have a secret weapon. And this carried on for a very long time, and people kept on asking, they were worried, and they kept on surviving. And one day someone asked her, but what was the secret weapon? How did we keep on surviving? She said it was simple. We had no other alternative. And that having no other alternative is a very important message to many people in South Africa. Many of us, myself included, I might have the means to be able to go to another country. But that being said, I know too many good people that can't do that. And for now, at least, it's absolutely worth every minute of my time to try and assist where I possibly can. And I think Rob summed it up perfectly. I think each of us have a niche role to play. I don't think there's going to be one leader that comes up and that's going to save the day in South Africa. I think we need to make sure that however we possibly can, whether it's through public participation, let's use DRSA as an example, or whether it is through other civil society bodies where you're actively involved, especially on ground level, you can really influence the community quite directly. And fighting crime is a perfect example. I spoke to a lady, and I would like to conclude with that a week or two ago. The last few weeks, I've spent a lot of time in some parts of the Cape Flats, specifically around issues of GBV and hectic gang violence. And I spoke to a lady there who's a chairperson of a neighborhood watch. And every morning, herself and mostly women walk a whole bunch of kids to school, and they basically do what they call a walking bus. They surround them and they make sure the kids don't get shot in crossfire if there's gang violence. And they inspire me so much to understand how thankful we can be for the wonderful things that and the privilege we have to be able to do what we're doing tonight, and that we can be making plans, etc. And every time I speak to her, not once has she ever complained about the circumstances that they live in. In fact, she has told me it's an absolute honor for her to make sure that those little kids get to school safe every day. And that's the example I think we need to have about being involved. It's that one place in your community where you can play a role. It's that one public participation process that you can spread the word and support, that I believe the more people we get involved, I would like to see, and maybe it sounds a bit melodramatic or stereotypical, I would like to see that chain reaction becoming bigger.
Absolutely. Joe, I must bring it to you in a different angle here, because, you have perhaps a perspective that some of us here don't have, insofar as, you were born in another country, have moved to South Africa. And some people might wonder, why would someone do that? Why would someone move to South Africa? But actually, this is somewhere you are sowing roots. You're married here, you have a home here. Your why, Joe?
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, I was born in the States. I lived there for the first 9 years of my life. Then I moved to Egypt. I lived there for 9 years. I've been in South Africa for close to 15 years now. So the most amount of time that I've been in a country in my life is here. So yes, my home has become South Africa. And it wasn't until just before the lockdown that I started to really realize how far gone South Africa is becoming. And then I started to take an interest in politics, and here I am today speaking out against the ANC. I mean, I wear a shirt proudly, Cyril Ramaphosa and Futsek ANC, because I disdain the ANC and what they've done to the South African people. And from a perspective, look, I've lived in a first world country when I was a kid. I do remember a lot of it. And I lived in a third world country, Egypt, and I remember quite a lot of that. South Africa was, and probably still is, right in the middle of that, but it's quickly regressing, unfortunately. Egypt crime stats are nowhere near South Africa, and things are getting really bad. So why would I stay here when I have an option? I do. I have the American passport. I could easily go tomorrow, buy a ticket, and go back to the States. Why would I stay here? Well, like you said, Sikhle, I'm married here. I've built a home here. My mom is here. My dad is still in Egypt. I have family here now, and I look at the possibility. And this is just from my perspective. I'm sure other people, I think everybody has to make their decision on their own with the option of. And at the moment, I know what it's like to be uprooted from a place that's all you knew, and now you gotta rebuild, almost make new friends, get acclimatized to the culture, whatever culture that country has. You gotta get used to the things how it's done there. You gotta rebuild, and it sounds romantic in some cases because sometimes it's good for you, but in other cases it can be a real struggle. And to do that to my wife, she's so close to her parents, their family is very close. I don't think it would work out as well as we would hope. She would probably want to come back anyway. So what do? You make a decision, and my decision was, you know what, we're probably going to stay here, but if we do stay here, let's make sure that we protect ourselves, number one, and number two, we start building a community that knows each other, that can protect each other, that when the chips fall, because they will, at some point they will, maybe even in 2024, there will be hell. But if it does, we are protected, and you get off the grid, you just don't become dependent on the state anymore. And I know that a lot of people are going to say, like, yeah, but that's expensive, or how do we do that? I mean, Sikhle, you and I have gone to some of the poorest places in Cape Town, and those people are already forgotten and struggling, and you've traveled across South Africa with people who don't have water and electricity for days on end. So there's already places that have been forgotten. But what are they doing? They are trying to take control and build their own community that is not reliant on the state. And the more people do that, the more we can break away from the state and become our own successful community. And on some level, I'm kind of blessed to be in the Western Cape, because eventually it's going to break away and become the independent Cape. So I'm fine. But everybody else needs to become their own community.
I see you throwing a Western Cape secession in there. I see you, homie. I see you. Chris, I'm going to end the segment off with you. and really we'll end the show after this. We'll do one more round of just how people can reach each of you and how we can get in contact with you. But Chris, you have the fortunate, I suppose, perspective here, insofar as being able to, as an outsider, quote unquote, looking in, have a broader, even sometimes at times, perspective on things. But there are South Africans who are literally saying, "This is our home, damn it. We're patriots. We're willing to fight." And often many of us, including me, willing to die for this country, and specifically not just the country, it's people. I always talk a lot about the country this and the country that, but really it's the people of this country who I'm willing to die for. And my mission, is to create that South Africa, which is one of a prosperous, property-owning, free and non-racial South Africa. That's what I work to do, so that those fellow brothers and sisters, and I call them family in this sense. This is the one time where I'll pinch an idea from Cyril Ramaphosa, but those family members of ours who have left our shores and have created homes elsewhere, I would like a situation where actually one day they might look back and go, finally, South Africa is the home that it should be. We're willing to come back. But as an outsider looking in, Chris, your thoughts on this?
Well, not just an outsider. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Okay. Not just an outsider, but also somebody that's lived everywhere. I mean, I lived in 38 of the lower 48 U.S. states before the age of 17. I've lived all over Europe. I've lived in 8 countries in Africa, from desperately broken places like Liberia to what are supposed to be semi-first world states like South Africa. And when my channel was blowing up last year, I was asked this question frequently by people who found my channel and said, "Hey, how do we immigrate? Should we immigrate? Should we leave South Africa? What do you think the future is?" And like Rob, I got to say, this is a deeply personal issue and one that people have to look at in your individual circumstances. I would never encourage anybody to abandon their homeland, ever, even if you lived in a crap hole like Albania. Sorry, Albania. But even if you live in Albania, I wouldn't encourage you to leave your homeland, because it's part of who you are. And it's a really difficult decision. And of course, the entire history of America is people coming from Asia to populate the Americas, or coming from Europe to populate the Americas, or Africa, or so on. People have come here to become Americans, which is not an ethnicity, it's an identity. It's a very deep and personal thing. And for South Africans, it depends on your age. If you're 50, you may not have the wealth to go to New Zealand, or you may not have the ability to restart somewhere else. And it also depends on your opportunity. If you're 22 and you just graduated university and you're denied opportunity because you're Indian or because you're white, well, then you might have to consider going. And it depends how much money you have. And it also depends on your offspring. A lot of people are concerned about their kids and their safety, and that's something you have to take in mind. Now, there's been some great comments here, both by Joe and Ian and Rob, about this. And I've heard, community get involved. Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sick of what's happening in America. And this is what I did. I ran for office on November 2nd. This arrived in the mail yesterday. Certificate of election. I was elected judge of elections. I'm involved. I got involved. I'm not apathetic. South Africans cannot be apathetic. You as a lot are incredibly apathetic. The only people I know complain more than South Africans are Americans, but at least we're not apathetic. We get out and do stuff, whether it's burning down our cities and police stations, or it's actually doing something positive. But no, seriously, build communities. That's the real answer here. Whether it's getting off the grid, it's community safety programs. The story about the lady who's escorting kids to school, I love that. That's absolutely brilliant. And I like the fact that Ian brought in Golda Meir in Israel. Here's the bottom line. When I was stationed in Israel, which is one of the things I've done in my life, among many other things, I spent 4 months there. I discovered something. Before I went to Israel, I always thought the Israelis were an amazing, superhuman army. They always beat the Arabs. I discovered something. They're okay. 2 things. Their neighbors suck. That's one reason they always win. And number 2, if they lose, it's like aliens. I don't know if you keep it score, man. We just got our asses kicked. Game over, man. Game over. So if they don't win, it's over. And that's the situation South Africans find yourselves in. You can't rely on the state. It won't prosecute crimes. It won't arrest criminals. It won't protect your farms. It won't protect your apartment buildings. It won't protect your communities. So you've got to organize in legal fashions, and you've got to do it on all levels, not just community safety, but also your schools, the other activities you do. Take care of yourselves. And it's easier than it sounds. Many of the townships are already on their own, as Joe and Big Daddy talked about. There's no police presence. After they murdered Collins Kosa and 11 other black South Africans in townships, Sandef and the SAPs disappeared. And then the freaking virus broke out into Omicron and Delta and Lambda. Oh, we skipped Guy. Sorry about that. Kai. We can't do that because it sounds too much like Xi Jinping. But anyway, seriously. But I got to thank Matt really quickly here because Joe's fallen over. We skipped that. But you guys got to watch this thing from Cape Town, this group called Goals. They got this brilliant Omicron Delta video on Facebook. You got to watch. Anyway, but I got to thank Matt because Matt brought up a really great question. I think this is a brilliant question. It's your decision. It's your choice. And it's a hard one to make. I wouldn't encourage anybody to leave South Africa. It's a brilliant place. I absolutely love South Africa. Wonderful people. As Big Daddy said, that's the strength of South Africa. Not the mountain vistas, not the Royal Amphitheater, not the surfing at Durban, not the High Veld, not the Karoo, not Table Mountain. It's the people that make South Africa what it is. Venda, Xhosa, Afrikaners, Tswana, Zulu, all these people, coloreds especially, man. That's who really makes the mix really cool in South Africa's the colors. It's an amazing country. But thanks to Matt for a brilliant question. It reminded me that I've had all of you on my program except Rob. I've never invited Rob to my program. I don't have a contact, so I'll leave it up to one of you to put me in touch with Rob. I'd like to welcome Rob because I've never had a Dear SA guest on my program. And there you go. That's my thoughts on it. I hope that helps. See you.
Excellent. That, of course, is Upra Chris White. Fellas, I must taper off and close tonight's show. We're running slightly over time, which is quite okay. Everybody gets a final word. More specifically, how do the people reach you, and what you're looking at in the week ahead? Rob, let me begin with you.
What a wonderful show. It was absolutely brilliant. And I wish it was a couple of hours longer. I think we could continue this conversation right until the sun rises on our side.
Absolutely.
Or sets on Chris's side, whichever way we're turning on the planet. But Joe's little quips, love them. But anyway, I think I'd have to echo Chris's words there. It's up to the individual to step up. And we are, as South Africans, we've been battered for decades, absolutely battered for decades, and taught to trust our government. I grew up in the 80s. I went to high school in the 80s, and I can tell you now, I had no idea what was going on out there. No idea whatsoever. We lived in a bubble, and there was no media, there was no communication. Things were rosy from where I looked, and then I looked further, and we found out what was really going on. And then we had the referendum, and I voted the correct way. But it's very easy to be misled by our government or by any government as it might go. And we have to learn to become more independent, trust ourselves. We are capable of absolutely anything we want to do, and we've got to realize our place in society as well. There was a question about different civil society groups working together to form a united front. There's two arguments to that question. You can either present yourself as one united force, but then you do have significant vulnerabilities. All it takes is one shot and the group is down. If we all realize that we have a common goal, and that common goal is that we want a better country, but we approach it from different sides and different initiatives in different ways, we realize we're all traveling towards the same destination, but on a different road. And then we can actually work together as such and create that better country that we need. And government will fight that. They will always fight against a united civil society. So let's not present it to them, but let's realize that we're all on that same path to that final destination. That's about it.
Absolutely. That, of course, is Rob Hutchinson, the MD of Dear SA. Chris, I'm going to give you final word, please. Also remind people how they can actually get on to your show. Or pardon me, how they can find your show, sorry. Just unmute yourself, Chris.
Yeah, you muted me earlier, so I can mute my mic by it's always off. I always touch it when I finish, but it's on now. She should be able to hear me. But I just want to say, so Rob, great words. And I'm not just trying to butter you up so you'll come on my program. Just to make that clear up front. But no, seriously, the comments I think are very important about what people can do and how they can take care of themselves. You ask about what's coming up on my program. I've actually had a lot of interesting guests of late, and we've covered a lot. I did extensive election coverage. That's happened. But in the coming couple weeks, we're prepping for Christmas, of course. And Chris Wyatt's Christmas for the World is coming up. That's a big program where we have kids come on. Kids don't come on the program, but they send their letters to Santa in Afrikaans, French, German, and In English. That's the other language. In English. And of course, I dress as Father Christmas. Last year, my helper was from Namibia, Marlies. She won't be on the program this year. She's tied up, but we will have another helper on. It will be Santa's helper. We have musical guests, including Steve Hofmeyer, Giselle, Monty Jackson, Trevor Donjane, lots of great musical guests on the program who come on for the Christmas special on the 23rd. On the 24th, I do a special for everybody, but it's not musical guests. People get to call in. And the 25th, which of course is my birthday, celebrate the anniversary of my birth. I'm on live on Christmas Day as well. So that's what's coming up in the near term, and maybe Rob will be on my channel soon. But anyway, that's kind of what's coming up with the channel. If you're looking for me, look for Chris Wyatt Africa on the PooTube. You can find me there, or on Odyssey, or on Rumble. And you can also find Rugby Ascendant, although there's no rugby until January. That's my sister channel where I do that. And there you have it. That's what's kind of coming up. Thanks for the opportunity to pop on the program. I appreciate it. It's awesome always to come on this program. It's always a fun and exciting panel. And of late, each time I've popped on, I've managed to get a guest on my program that was on the panel afterwards. So, Rob, you can't break that streak. No pressure, brother. No pressure.
Well, there you have it. There you have it. That is, of course, Chris White. Please make sure you subscribe to his channel and catch his content. Let me bring you on, Joe. Final word. Dude, what can the folks expect from you, pardon me, on the Joe Emilio show? And of course, how do they reach you, dude?
Point of privilege. Point of privilege. How come Joe gets to go last? That isn't fair.
Actually, Ian is going last, but okay.
I forgot about Ian. He's been so quiet for the last minute or so.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, you can reach me. I have dropped my link to my channel in the chats, but you can also reach me www.joemilio.co.za. That's my website. And in closing, I just want to echo what Rob and Chris have said. You know, when it comes to immigrating, it is a personal choice. But I will say this with my chest: I really do love South Africa. I've been to America, and I've been in Egypt, and I've been to other places in the world. I've been in Europe. I've been many places. I've been blessed from my dad to travel a lot in my family. And South Africa is definitely the most beautiful place I have ever been to. And I will say that every time without any reservation on that. The people are amazing. I echo what Chris said about the people 100%. But it's the government that is so crap. So from here on out, ladies and gentlemen, do yourself a favor. Start talking about the problems of South Africa with your friends, your family at Bryce. The more people talk, the more people create awareness, the more people get angry, and the more people will do something about it. One of the biggest problems in South Africa is that I think we are too used to problems. You know, every time something happens, or you hear about DNA backlog, or you hear about a murder, or you hear about crisis, or you hear about corruption, it just feels like South Africans are like, well, TIA, this is Africa. No, that attitude needs to stop. It's time for South Africans to stand for what they believe in, to stand for their rights, and to put up a fight. Not violently, but to put up some kind of fight. Wake up, South Africa. And yeah, that's all I have to say. And if you want this shirt, go to rebelstoresza.com.
Absolutely. There you go. Joe with the last minute merch punting there. And last but of course, definitely not least, is Upra Ian Cameron. There he is on screen. Ian, homie, again, before you even go into your final word, dude, I'm so proud of you and this initiative that you're launching. Please, once again, remind people how they can get it, and of course, how they can join or become a part of or support Action Society SA.
Yes, thanks, Sikli, and thanks for the chat, guys. Firstly, Firearms Guardian, please visit firearms.co.za. You'll see the link for Firearms Guardian there. It gives you the whole overview of how you can sign up. Please get involved. I think it's for your own benefit, and it basically helps to unite lawfully armed citizens in South Africa. So that's the first part. Then in terms of Action Society, go to Action Society's website, check it out. This week, we're actually carrying on, and it might be a discussion for another day, is we've built an action center model that we're going to launch early in 2022. It basically provides us with a whole private initiative for us to oversee tens of hundreds of dockets from prosecution to investigation, even parts of forensics, in partnership with certain law enforcement agencies, officers, etc. And I think it's also a first of its kind in South Africa. And I think it will probably be the first alternative, let's rather not call it alternative, the first civil partnership that we can build with law enforcement, and also do private initiatives for decent law enforcement, justice, and obviously with that justice comes successful prosecution. So we'll share a lot more about that, but we're in the last stages of finalizing a few things before we go live in February 2022.
Absolutely. And really looking forward to that. Really, you are an inspiration, Jude. I cannot begin to overemphasize that particular point.
Thank you.
That is, of course, Ian Cameron from Action Society, SA, and of course, Firearm. To all